my cause.
Right, so I'm going to do a quick lightning talk on how you should test your React application. So it should be no more than 15 minutes. So back to the basics of why do you want to test your front-end app. So there's 4 things which are important to bear in mind. So tests, they don't just identify problems, they help prevent them. So having the reflex to like unit test your things actually makes you ask like what are the edge cases, what you should think about, and it helps prevent problems. And also they help identify them, so when you make a change, which is also breaking change with what's in the rest of the app, you see it. They also help teams work together, so facilitate collaboration. If I'm new to a project or someone wants to work on my project, they know what not to do. And that leads to the third point, which is it makes developers more confident, so you can work faster because you can trust that the tests have got your back. And it lowers the cost of doing a refactor, because when you refactor your code, you're not sure what you're going to touch, what you're going to break, and tests will help you identify that. So last point, debatable one if you're on a small project like it lasts 6 weeks, because tests are an investment of time and resources, but they should make you go faster. So when you are like on a 2-year project, you really feel the weight of like the hundreds of business and technical decisions, and tests will help you like know what you're breaking, basically. So how can you test? So in React, I've noted like 4 ways of testing. They're not incompatible with each other, you can use them alongside each other. They all have like strengths and weaknesses. So the one I've seen commonly used on the Admiral project was snapshot testing. So for those of you who hasn't seen snapshot testing, everyone's seen it, so I don't need to go over what it is. Okay. So it's cheap, but it's also quite painful when you're on a complex project because it doesn't properly test it. I would recommend it as a way of seeing like regressions in your UI, but not as a means to test. You also have the React test utils, which come along with the React package. So Facebook built these to go with React. So they allow for proper testing. They do render like a DOM, but they're quite unfriendly to use. So it's not easy to actually make your test cases with it. And you also get end-to-end tests, which are just they help you build a quality product, but they do take a long time to put in place and to maintain. So as an anecdote, when I was at Société Générale, one of the teams implemented end-to-end tests because of PO, for there was too many regressions, and by the end of the project, they were spending up to a third of a sprint correcting the tests.
Also, they take a long time to run.
Yes, and they take a long time to run. And so then there's Enzyme. So Enzyme is an abstraction over the React test utils, and it's great and it has an easy-to-use syntax. So the talk is going to become like how you should test with React more than how you should test how you should test React with Enzyme more than how you should test React. And if you want to install Enzyme on your project, it's quite simple. There's 2 libraries. Because React 16 is breaking with React 15, you have to use an adapter. So you install the adapter and you install Enzyme, and it's 3 config lines, and then you can use it in your file. In your test, sorry. So, how does Enzyme interact with your code? So there's 3 modes of rendering. There's one which is shallow, so I would think of it as unit testing. So you take a simple component, you render it, and you can test its props and how it behaves at like a unit level. But that might not be interesting if say you don't have that much time and you want to maximize the impact of your test in preventing bugs. You might want to do some integration testing and render more complex part of your applications. So what the mount function of Enzyme does, so that's a shallow, you have the mount function, is basically you point to a node somewhere in your tree, it could be the top one like the app, and you render everything including its children. And you can go into a lot of depth in your application and test like components really far down the hierarchy of your components. And then there's a simple HTML render, which to be honest is almost never used, so let's not worry about that. So I'm just going to take an example of like a fictive app called Netflix, and it's like a movie recommendation app. You have like 3 movies, and you might have like a header bar and a login button, etc. I'm just going to go through some simple test cases of how you would use Enzyme. So we're going to start with maybe like a not too interesting one. So one thing I think is great with Enzyme is when we write our user stories, we tend to expect a visible result, and Enzyme can really help you zero in on that visible result. So say I have a user story, like as a user, I can see my top 3 favorite movies on the home page, which could be like one you can find on a project like Netflix. You would mock your store, you would do whatever you need to set up for the data, and then you would render the home page. So what the mount function does is I can put whatever amount of HTML and JSX I fill in between, and it will create a virtual DOM, and you can interact with that virtual DOM. So here I'm rendering my home page, and in my home page I expect to find the movie recommendation component 3 times, and you can use whatever selectors you feel. So CSS selectors, like a paragraph in a div with a class, an ID. You can even check if there's a component somewhere in the DOM which has a particular prop. You can put other components. It's quite flexible. And it comes with a load of utilities to iterate over your DOM. So if you want to iterate over all your movies, you can do a for each, and it will pass you the node and you can test if it has a class like selected or not. So you can test your styles, and you can test what components you have. So that's like the basic case, but it's not too interesting because what we really want to do is also test the components depending on the state and the props. So you can fully interact with any component's state or props, just like with a set state and set props function. So say you have a user story. As a user, if I'm not logged in, I see a login button in the header bar. It's quite easy to render your home page, set the state to true, logged into true, and you find your header bar, find returns a reference to the component in the DOM, and you can also run find on header bar then to find the login button, see if it exists. It's really flexible.
When you do a set state, it re-renders the component?
Yes. One point to bear in mind is if lifecycle methods like component will receive props are important to you, so when you set props, you do something magic in component will receive props, you need to use mount. Shallow doesn't do it. So mount, not only does it do like an expanded DOM, but it also enables you to test lifecycle methods, which is good. But finally we get to the most interesting case, which is the one we see the most frequently, is when you simulate events on your interface. So say I have a user story. As a user, when I click on see more, I get an extra row of movie recommendations, and in the ticket you detail like you should have no less than like 3 movie recommendations, always have 3, but if you click see more you should have 6, and it's impossible for you to have any less than 3. Well, I could write the test case. On my home page, I find there are movie recommendations. There should be 3 of them. Then I go find the button with the label see more. I click it, literally click it, and then I expect that to be 6. And if I click see less, I expect that to be 3. And if I click see less again, nothing happens. I expect that to be 3. So that's quite a simple test case, and it really like locks your functionality in place. Finally, if you're debugging your tests, you want to know what's happening inside because you expect that to be a component as you know there isn't, or undefined or whatever. It's quite easy for you to shallow or mount your component, and then you just console log your component.debug, and you'll get like the full nicely formatted HTML of your component, and it's really easy for you to see what's happening inside. And that's basically it. It was a really lightning talk. Any questions?
Yes. So in Enzyme, you find on your wrapper.
Yeah.
And so you use the component name as a string.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I don't know why, but I can't find the component unless I actually find like the real component that I import in my file. I don't know if that.
I see what you mean, yeah. But well, a React component can be any of a string function or component class, so it should work with a string.
So it should work with both.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to set the display name.
Oh, that's for start components. There's a case in start components when if you say you call your component like my paragraph, and it's a styled paragraph, in the Enzyme DOM it comes up as a P and not as your component name, but that's a different scenario.
It can happen actually with any higher order components where you don't set the display name. The higher order component will wrap your component.
Yeah.
It will be rendered as a component, so you can find it anyway. It happens.
Yeah. So it's not perfect, but you can do a lot with it.
And what does the assertion stuff come with Enzyme? What's that?
For
Do
what?
you expect doc to be
No, so Enzyme just gives you the utility to render like the virtual part of it, the virtual DOM, and then just look inside it. But if you want assertions, you have to turn to either jest or chai, You do find integrations with like chai enzyme, so you do have like things to simplify the syntax, but it doesn't give you anything like on the test running part or on the assertion part.
So you can do this across multiple pages as well. If you like push, can you simulate like browser pushes?
If you render high enough,
So you render the app.
yeah. If you render the whole app with a router,
Yeah.
you could feasibly go into the different components, yeah.
So you do some quite powerful integration testing.
Yeah,
Just this.
but you won't have like the window object, for instance, which you might want to interact with.
Yeah.
And haven't tried, for instance, running sagas in the background or whatever, but that would be an interesting case. If you could feasibly mock your whole backend, you could, in theory, have like quite a complete set of integration tests for your front end.
These mock stores that you used, you can actually run your Saga middleware.
You can run the same middleware, yeah. Okay.
It's not necessarily super useful, but you can do it.
Yeah.